my things is I see a lot of folks fail at this system is they don't take into consideration how they're getting there. So a lot of the access is through here. So we're going to put human tracks all the way across here, the top, or right on the fence line, let's say. And this is how they're accessing their stand. This might be, you know, something where you're coming from above, then you drop down into it. But as you're walking across here, you're not only going kind of, you know, you're playing with fire, I guess is the best way to explain it. Because here's the deal: what is in this core that's exiting or entering ahead of you? So if once you're in the stand, obviously you're blowing the wind to the east in this setup. East wind is blowing it to the west, so you're dumping it over top, you're pushing it over top of their heads. But to get to that stand, you know, unless you're going to get dropped in there, you have to be able to access that. So you have to come all the way across from your east fence row, all the way across, maybe on your north property line, but you're still going all the way across this. This whole line through here is now saturated ahead of you. So that this stand could be blown before you even get there. And why is that? The reason is we're just going to draw a stick figure here. The reason is when you are on the ground walking to this setup, and let's say obviously we're talking about a morning setup, so let's just stay on that topic. You're walking to this morning setup. You are down below. You're not 20 foot in the air. 20 foot in the air is the pinnacle is the pinnacle to make sure that this process works. When you are on the ground before you get there, what if the buck that you hope that this situation that we talked to isn't there? What if he's standing there at your licking branch, and you access this, you know, just before daylight? You can't do it on gray light. You have to do it in the dark because you have no idea. There's no sense in doing it in gray light because you have no idea what's down below there because you can't see it coming into it. So, you know, using that gray light, you can't use it to your advantage. So it's dark. You're coming in here. Now what you've got the wind at your back. The wind's at your back, and now it's going right down and saturating this entire line of travel before you even get into the stand. So now with your AM thermals coming at you, and the wind over the top of your head, where this is going to dump, it is going to, without a doubt, it's not going to go over their heads at that point. It's going to hit right there. It's going right over top of the hill, 25 yards down, and this is where that wind circle is going to dump right on that scrape. So, to me, there's some pros to that topic, and you hear about it all the time. There's some folks in the industry even that have killed some great deer by using this, but I think this is, you know, something to consider on access to make sure that this works. I would do to cure this problem is I always look for this equation. With the wind, knowing that the wind's at your back, your best bet is to try to access this as close to this stand location as you possibly can. Now, if there's ag out here on the neighboring property, if there's ag down below that's creating this line of travel up through here, that makes this spot as powerful as it gets going, and these trail systems come through, you have to watch. Are you obviously you're above this because it's ridge country, but can you get in and out of the stand? The object is to try to get into this stand location as quick as you can, up above it and straight into it, or, you know, your access from the west in, up this, and then cutting the line of travel. You know, I've seen this done before, cutting the line of travel, and then that way your wind is in your favor the entire time getting in, and you have a shorter. Yes, you're cutting the line of travel, but you're not saturating the entire farm. So, you know, if you're going to get your boot tracks cut, you'd rather them get your boot tracks cut at the point of impact near that scrape. So if it is the buck you're going to kill, you can kill him then. To me, that's still a variable that, you know, most deer may let you get away with. The mature buck that you're after may not. So is it worth doing? Is it not? That's something that you have to determine. So that's an access way into the AM sits. One, like we said, your access. Two is your camera. You know, the cameras don't tell us what they do every day, but that camera is your ticket to success to make this opportunity work. If you can't access closer to the stand location on a neighboring property because of ag, because it's their property and they don't want you accessing, whatever the case is. And this situation gets worse if it's in the interior of your property. Keep in mind, now you have no way to get to to it on a neighboring property if this is internal of your farm. Makes the situation even worse. So the back to the cameras here. That camera is the ticket to success. And why is that? The reason is we can bank on those deer movements at certain times of the day, knowing that we have a short window of opportunity to get in there. So this is what I recommend. As goofy as it sounds, if you have movement at 5 o'clock and there's no deer coming through there the majority of the time. When I say the majority of the time, I would urge you to really look at 80% of the time and more, that there's a defined gap in that travel on those cameras. Once there's that defined gap on there, then hey, I've got a short window. I have to get in there between 5 a.m. and 6:30, or I have to get in there between 5 and 6 a.m. and then I'm in there, and then this will work. Then you have to look into the future at your temperatures. You have to look into the future of your wind, and you have to make this a very strong one-time approach. This setup here is not something that you want to try to do 3 times a week. Even if you've got easterly winds, and that's the leeward side of this ridge, and you know that you can kill a buck there, it's not a stand location that you want to do 3 times a week. It might not be a stand location you want to do 3 times a month. So really, really study. That's probably one of the most stand locations throughout the entire deer range that I've ever ran into, that I recommend, and I do myself. Really, really dig into that and really study the ins and outs, the pros and the cons of hunting that setup. So now let's touch on real short here. The AM situation was one of the strongest points that I wanted to make. The PM hunt here is just this theory in reverse. Now, what makes a PM hunt strong in this location, and the reason that I have 2 stand locations pinned out here with this line of travel coming through the center of it, because a PM hunt, obviously your thermals are sinking. So what I find is this diagram here with the ridge, we would be accessing obviously in from below it on this stand location, on this sit on a PM hunt, because we are now below. We would be using our west fence row on an east wind. We'd be using our west fence row, and we'd be coming up into this stand location, which is in here on this bottom diagram. We'd be walking into it and then turning and coming right up the ridge. Now on a PM hunt, this is a no-brainer. Obviously you got to watch ag below you. You got to watch where you're blowing the wind and where your thermals are sinking this into. Is it a valley? How far down the ridge are you? So there's a lot of variables in that as well. These might not be in the same location, but if you have these and some opportunities where you can have a stand above and you can have a stand below, sometimes you can hunt the same licking branch or the same point of impact on AM and PM hunts. That's a pretty powerful sit. If you're down below on a PM sit, which you should be, the thing is here is your stand placement. You have to take into consideration your stand placement on these as far as a block. And when I mean a block is, if you're right-handed in this, and so you would be facing pretty much, your stand location on a evening sit is not going to be looking up the hill. So the reason that I'm going with this is when these deer round this corner or work their way down this ridge, you're going to have the opportunity, you're going to be eye level with those deer. The further you go down the bank, the more that you're on eye level with these deer. Object is to be as close to this as you can. So maybe cheat it a little bit, so you're only 15 yards from this to help your elevation a little bit. And then what I like to do is I like to put obviously if you're right-handed, I like to put the stand obviously facing, which would be facing the south. So you right-handed, you're just over the edge. So tilt it just a little bit so you can obviously see the deer coming. So you're looking over your left shoulder here, looking back around this corner, just keeping an eye on that. And what that does is that gives you the block of the tree, because the worst thing that you could do is when a deer, if this is a corner or if this is a long ridge system, comes down through here and this platform is hanging out with your human silhouette hanging out here. If it's a ladder stand, even could be worse. That silhouette's hanging off the side of the tree here, and when they round the corner or come down through here, you're skylined, or because you're at deer level. So turn that in, use those trees as a blocker. Now it's just reverse for left-handed hunters. In this situation, you would have to be facing the north for a left-handed shot. And what that you want to make sure is which way in this situation is your line of travel coming from, because if they're coming at you on a left-handed situation, it can still work because your body structure is in line with the tree at that point. You're not hanging off the entire side of it. That these situations, like I said, guys, these situations are just something that you don't have to take into consideration when it's flatter ground and you're 20 foot above their heads, and there's no we're just dealing with the wind at that point. So it's a tricky system, but boy, I'm here to tell you, it's a powerful piece of the puzzle in that country. And if you can pull these off, if you can learn the way of hunting ridge country, it's like I said, it's a powerful tool. But these are some of the points that I've learned along the way that talking about leeward winds on ridges, and talking about stand placements, talking about using the tree as a blocker, sucking these PM sits closer to the trail as you would before to get you up above their line of sight. All of these things, but one of the biggest things here is I feel in this whole video is just this topic right here. I really encourage you to really study and really weigh out, is it worth, how am I getting into that stand location? Is it worth saturating the farm to get to this? Because obviously, like we said, the reason that these deer on an east wind are on the west side of the ridge on leeward winds. Now, if this is a west wind, if this happens, if you happen to have a couple of ridges or one main ridge on your farm, then what's going to happen is on westerly winds, you're going to have this situation. Now the east side of this ridge, it would be the leeward side. In the ridge country, this is what mature deer, all deer, this is what mature deer live in every day. So we have to structure our hunting skills to meet and beat this strategy. And so that's something, to me, is the access. That's the biggest thing that I see, is how do you get in and out of these stands. So once you're in there, you can make this situation work. And then you have to, like we said, you have to really figure out, play the wind, play your thermals, and really know that you're good until from your access at let's say you have to get in there at 6 o'clock. Let's say you have to get in there at 5 o'clock. This situation is going to be good until you leave. So really take that into consideration. Access to me is what makes or breaks this entire deal. So there's a couple points there on ridge system. I love figuring these out. I love helping clients figure these out. But like I said, access to me makes or breaks this. And the finishing point here, if this situation that we're speaking of, guys, is interior of your farm, make sure that you don't get yourself in trouble by accessing the center of this farm to just get to that stand location. Figure out a way to make that work, and figuring that out may be the further you come interior, may be using the correct wind direction on your west side of the farm, entering up, cutting the line of travel so you don't have to saturate the entire farm, taking the opportunity or taking the chance, just cutting the line of travel. And if you follow me at all, I'm not the guy to cut the line of travel, but if you're going to have to cut the line of travel in a situation, this is it. Now, one of the things I'm going to talk about here in closing is kind of tying into contour. And the reason I just, as I'm talking about this internal, I had a situation like this that we should probably touch on here with that same client in Wisconsin. So this situation right here, where this ridge is going all the way through here, and if this ridge is completely pretty much flat, the ridge top is pretty much flat, and this all falls off, then these situations can be different opportunities all the way along that shelf. Now, what I ran into in Wisconsin was a situation that a gentleman had done some postseason scouting and had found a really powerful setup. He's got one of these setups that he kills deer all the time, and he's only been that one situation that we spoke of, so it works for him. He knows how to do it, but there was a situation on a stand location that we looked at together that he felt that he could really about 100 or a couple hundred yards from this location, that he really felt like that was another spot that he could kill that buck. He found a native scrape, an active scrape made by them, and really wanted to hang a stand there, but it's internal of the farm. It's and I'd have to look at the aerial again here to remember that, but it's pretty much interior of the farm. Now, the problem with it is this ridge line comes up and makes a kind of a what I referred to him with as a peninsula. it sticks out here like that. So this whole ridge system comes out a little bit and comes in. Well, so the spot that he found, there was a buck bed, there's a bunch of rubs right here on the end of it, and the stand location he was looking at was right here, and he was thinking about trying to pull this same situation off here. So as we walked, we come up into the stand location, and the first thing that I caught was the change in the contour. Because if this situation would have been out on the end, and we were able to do this, you know, right out on the end of it, the problem was all the activity, this trail right here, came from along the edge and came right on the top of this and then went back on the side. So it actually was in further. So this was a kind of a plateau, if you will, out there. So instead of him being on this contour, now you're dealing with, it wasn't completely flat, but now we're talking about maybe, you know, going from a, you know, let's just use round numbers, let's say going from a 30-degree change, now he was at like a 15. And so now what happens is, now, to me, now you're really playing with fire, because you can't physically push this you know, using the thermals that are coming up here. And this is a flat grade before it goes up again, a more of a bench, if you will, but flat, 'cause it's really steep on this side. So the deer were coming through off the top of this peninsula, or kind of that, you know, kind of that hogback ridge that pointed out there, that dead-end ridge. So they used the corner over here because they didn't want to use that steep slope. So it forced them into here. It's a great spot. The problem with it is, guys, is he cannot do this on that, because this wind here, accessing one, is too interior of the farm. That's one. The second thing is this, is because this contour goes out and away, and you can't dump that wind, directly dump that wind push that wind over the top of their head and not have a chance of that, your thermal circling and dumping the wind right back on top of them. Here, it would have definitely had that happen. What would have happened in this situation if he would have hung that stand there? I really believe two things would have ruined this stand, and it could have potentially ruined this setup that it's a you know, a dynamite setup on his property in this location. So we elected to use this as buck bedding, and we pulled this stand location all the way. We made a, you know, a buck corridor that comes through. He's got some food here involved. We brought it all the way over to a stand location on this side, and we transferred those deer all the way across it. And that's the way that we ended up hunting that. We ended up leaving well enough alone. So and those situations, you just have to really take this into consideration. Use your contour. If you're new to contour, I highly recommend studying this video, researching other videos that guys that, you know, live in that live in that realm 365 days a year, and really get to a point where you understand. Like I said, I'll be the first one to tell you, when I go back to those areas when I'm hunting myself, or I'm designing these properties in that ridge country, I have to slow down a little bit and really put those pieces of those puzzles that aren't just a no-brainer with wind. There's other things in that ridge country that plays in, that I think get a lot of folks into trouble. And I also think that gets a lot of folks that actually live there into trouble, because this situation right here, he just overlooked that little piece of that puzzle with that contour right there. And as soon as I brought that to his attention, he was like, you're exactly right, let's pull the plug. We're not doing that. Because after I showed him that contour change, everything has to be perfect. Everything is not perfect in that situation. Don't chance it.